What is up, Scream Team? Zach Cherry here, and in this video we are going to be tallying up everyone who killed everyone in the Scream franchise on this lovely tier list. And I guess the reason for this is that I just wanted to kind of collect all the data that I've built up over the last however many years doing these Who Killed Who videos and just put it all together in this chart to get the final tallies of every character. So this isn't going to be in depth like any of my other videos, which if you haven't seen, you can go check out. I'll put the playlist in the places where you put the playlist. This is just going to be pretty simple. I'll give a brief explanation as to why I think this person killed X person, and I am also going to include the heroes, because you know some of them have kills as well. For the most part, this is going to be pretty much aligned with what I already went over in my videos. I do want to point out that I will be upgrading the first 4 movies for Who Killed Who, just so I can have videos that more closely align the more recent ones that are just the longer form, more in-depth, because, you know, when I started the channel however many years ago and did those first Who Killed Who's, I didn't really think that it was going to be such a huge thing, and I kind of glossed over a lot of stuff, so I feel like there's more to say. But in terms of this, we're just going to go through everything chronologically, starting right back to the beginning, or before the beginning, with Maureen Prescott. And obviously we know that this was Billy and Stu. Now I only have one character box for Maureen, so I have to choose one of them, even though it is both of them, but I'm gonna give it to Billy just for the fact that there is that conversation between Gail and Sydney where it's alluded to that Sydney thought she saw Cotton Weary leaving the house that night of her mother's murder. And from behind, we know that Cotton does sort of resemble Billy in a way, at least from what we saw in that first movie. So if it came down to both of them, I think that that was more evidence to show that Billy was in the house, if, you know, Stu might have been a lookout. But either way, I'm just gonna give it to Billy in this case. Next we have Steve. I'm gonna say that Steve was a Stu kill, mostly for the gutting. Then when it comes to Casey, who was also gutted, this is the caveat here, because I think that when we see her in the tree, I think that everything that happened after the last time we saw her as she was being dragged away, like that was all Billy who ran down the side of the house. I will give credit to Stu. He was probably the one who did the evisceration after she was already hung in the rope swing. But we should know that that was Billy who chased her down the side of the house, because, I mean, stabbing methods and also the fact that he did strangle her, which was another Billy MO. So yeah, I'm gonna say that Casey was Billy. Next we have Himbry. Now, initially I said that this was Billy way back when, and honestly I have no idea. This is probably the one kill that I could waffle back and forth. I'm gonna say that it's Stu for now until I do that next video where I go back, mostly for the fact because if we're going by kill styles, yeah, he comes out from behind the door and he's not doing the Stu thing of like holding the knife above his head, but you know, he is stabbing him in the gut, and that is more of a Stu thing, I think. So we'll just say this for now. We did see Stu walking towards the school right before the scene, so I mean, it could be either or. But next up we have Tatum, and this is Billy. I think more so for the fact that Stu is at the party, he's entertaining guests, and, you know, he very well could have snuck out, but this is more so a retroactive thing, and, you know, clearly this is more so in the minds of the new writers in Radio Silence, in 5 in particular. But I think the fact that Dewey seems kind of flippant when mentioning Stu, like he just kind of calls him some Looney Tune or whatever, whereas when Sam comes to his trailer and asks for his help, he kind of says, you know, the fact that she's Billy Loomis's daughter is like the worst possible reason that he could help her. So I think just based on his reactions to Billy and Stu separately, and the fact that he's kind of chummy with Vince in the deleted scenes, reads to me like this is probably Billy. And that's why, you know, it's more difficult for him to have any sort of association with anyone who's related to the person who killed his sister. So Tatum is Billy. Kenny, pretty sure this is Stu. I know that Billy was doing more, like he wasn't just hanging out playing dead upstairs, like he obviously had more that he was doing in that scene, but I think it's safe to say that this is Stu. And then Stu, obviously we know that that was Sydney. And we know that Billy was Sydney. So that's Scream 1. Scream 2, we've got Phil first. And I've heard people say that this is Mrs. Loomis. I don't understand why anyone needs to give Mrs. Loomis or Nancy more kills than she really needs. This is obviously Mickey. Regardless of whatever he was whispering, that was him in the bathroom. He took the jacket and went to sit down next to Maureen. So yes, Maureen is Mickey as well. Because there's no way that that was Nancy, because she would know. The frame of this person's body, it was clearly a man who was the size of Mickey, and little Laurie Metcalf would not be able to, fill out that jacket the same way that Mickey would. Nancy was the getaway driver. She was waiting in the car, which we should know from the video camera that we saw when Dewey and Gail were watching on the monitor later. So then we have Cece, and this is another one that people seem to want to credit to Mrs. Loomis, but Mrs. Loomis was the one on the phone. Mickey went into the house. He was the one that chased her up the stairs, threw her over the balcony. Obviously, I go more into depth as to what each one of their individual plans were when I did the Who Killed Who in Scream 2 video. But for Mrs. Loomis, who's the mastermind here, it's kind of would behoove her to get the least amount of blood on her hands. And we know that Randy was an impulsive kill, whereas Cece was kind of part of this copycat thing, which was all Mickey's. She just wanted to get revenge on the survivors, on Sydney and Gail. So yes, we should know that. What am I doing here? Look at me already making mistakes. So Mickey, all these people are Mickey. We should know that Randy is Nancy because she admits so herself at the end, and that's good enough for me. Now, when it comes to the officers, basically everyone else here. So starting with the officers, this is both Mickey, so Andrews and Richards, and then also Hallie in that same scene. And I mean, we should know it was Mickey who was in the car because he has the gash on his head when he unmasks himself later on. And then we see Mickey shoot Derek, so pretty self-explanatory. And then for Mrs. Loomis, this is, I mean, you could argue that Sydney was the one that killed her, but I like to think that she was already dead when Cotton pulled the trigger. So then when it comes to Mickey, this is both Sydney and Gail, but because I don't think Gail really has anything else, I'm just going to give it to Gail. But just know that it's Sydney and Gail, just because I didn't make two separate character squares for Mickey. So, okay, everything in Scream 3 is obviously Roman, but I will say that for any of the Angelina truthers out there, if Angelina is a killer in Scream 3 and Roman killed her before, her monologue at the end or however you want to think it. The only person that Angelina could have feasibly killed, as far as I am concerned, is Sarah Darling in the studio while Roman would have been on the phone with her, just more so because we see in the setup for that scene, which is now available, if you watch the assembly cut, but it's always been in the deleted scenes, that someone was watching her from one of the other building rooftops on the lot. So whoever was in the studio was already there to kill her. But if we are going by the alternate opening where Christine is already dead in the apartment before Cotton gets there and finds her body, I would say that that was also Angelina. But the way that it's done in the final cut, obviously Christine's and Cotton's killer is the same person, which is Roman. So really it's just an alternate reality if for the people who want to think that Angelina was a killer. Personally, I don't, and I never have. So when it comes to Roman, that was obviously Dewey, one for Dewey there. So now Scream 4, now this is a really contentious one. I feel like most people, from what I've seen in the comments on my last videos, have agreed with me for the most part for the first two movies. It's really, where Scream 4 and 5 are concerned, that's where there's a lot of debate. That's where people get really unhinged. But I'm going to say Marnie and Jenny. And this includes the alternate opening as well, which, you know, I could splinter those off. I think it's both Charlie. He more or less admits it at the end, for one. I know that some people think that Jill at least killed Jenny, but it's always been my belief, or just like how I've seen it, there's really no evidence to point towards Jill having killed anyone other than Charlie and Trevor, which is part of the plan. So, you know, that'll include Olivia, which obviously we know is Charlie, just because Jill witnessed it from across the street. I do want to amend something, though. There's a few things I want to amend here. First of all, I guess the inconsistency of the killer in the closet and why the cops allegedly chase after someone down the street when there was, you know, both killers' locations were accounted for, which brings up the question, who did the cops chase down the street? And some people have said that it was Trevor, which, you know, seems a little weird to me, because why would Trevor, A, run away from the cops? Like, they clearly stated that they chased someone in a Ghostface costume. And then B, why would Trevor come back to the house afterwards if he was being chased by the cops? So I think the best way to headcanon this is that it was the 15th anniversary of the Woodsboro Massacre. We already knew that people were going hog wild for it, just because of the Stabathon. We saw all the Ghostface props up on the street lamps earlier on. So I think the best way, which I mean, I wish that they would have explored this more just to make sense of it, is that there were people in the town that were just playing pranks, kind of like Halloween 4 with all the Michael Myers. That would have been the easiest solution, and that's kind of the one that I'm choosing to believe, that kind of allows me to make sense of this weird plot hole. Anyway, when it comes to Rebecca, obviously I'm going to say that this is Charlie. People say that he was with Robbie, or he was accounted for. We did not see him or Robbie during the scene where Rebecca is thrown from the parking garage. And I mean, according to the deleted scenes, which I still consider canon, Jill is in the hospital. She's with either her mom or Trevor. She wouldn't have had a chance to get away. Charlie's whole purpose for coming there was to kill Rebecca. And Robbie would not bat an eye if Charlie had walked away from him for a brief amount of time. Whereas if Jill just kind of like got up and disappeared from the hospital while she was being monitored, that would be a big red flag, or at least people would be like, what happened to Jill? What's going on? So yes, this is still all Charlie. And that brings us to the next kind of plot hole, whatever you want to call it, with the cops and Kate. And I still haven't seen anything to suggest that this was Jill, because Jill was already gone. She snuck out of the house, met up with Kirby. They were already at Kirby's house before anyone got there. And Charlie had the cop's gun, which he gave to Jill later on. Implying that he was the one that killed them and took it off of their bodies. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then that also fits in with the idea that Charlie was still at the house to kill Kate at the front door. And that brings me to the other inconsistency that I wanted to kind of amend, because when I made this Who's Killed Who in Scream 4 video, I didn't properly research it, but I had just assumed that either they were both there, which didn't make sense because one was at the back and one was at the front. But in the script for Scream 4, it's revealed that there's a prop Ghostface costume put up in the back on the porch there, and that's what Sydney sees the reflection of in the wind chimes. So this is still Charlie being really crafty, with a lot of kills too. I mean, Charlie is not my favorite by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that he does deserve a little bit more credit than he gets. We know that he is also Robbie's killer, because Jill was inside and Charlie was still outside when Robbie was coming up to the door after Sydney had arrived. And then from this point on, we know that Jill got Trevor and Charlie. And then for Jill, that was Sydney. All right, so Scream 5, Vince. I'm 100% certain that this was Richie. You know, people have argued with me saying that Richie was at the hospital. You know, scene to scene, it does not necessarily mean that it's happening right after the events that we had just seen. And we especially can see this in Scream 6, if you pay attention to timestamps and clocks on the walls and things like that. And just the stabbing method, the killing method, Richie goes for the neck, which retroactively taking into consideration the continuity of Scream 6 with the Kirsch family, and the way that, and not to jump ahead here, but Wayne killing the people in the bodega, going for the neck and things like that. I fully believe that he trained his kids how to stab people, how to use knives, because I think that they were always a messed up family before any of this happened. So I think that that is more Richie's kill style, to go for the neck. It's, simpler, cleaner, a more efficient way to kill people, whereas Amber is really sloppy, and especially more so like in the torso, in the midsection. And this just does not register with Amber's energy. And regardless of the fact that Amber was in the bar right before this, I don't think that it would be very wise for her to separate from the friends, kill this person, and then, we see later that they're at the police precinct. Even though that was a deleted scene, it is referenced at the hospital by Judy. So she would have had to have an alibi to shield her from any incrimination in regards to the Vince murder. So I think that it's very likely that this is Richie's kill. With Judy, this is a very intricate scene of the two of them. I think that Amber is the one that killed Judy, and I think that Richie was inside the house on the phone with Judy, and he was the one who snuck downstairs because he did know that he was in the shower and snuck up behind him. And then again with the more so like stabs into the neck, that's more Richie, whereas Judy's kill was very chaotic, out in the open. Like, that's a pretty risky thing to do in broad daylight. That was very much Amber, and then Richie would have been inside. Then that brings us to Clay, which is his name. I just called him like random police officer before. But this guy, I mean, we can see again, it's a throat wound or a slit throat, which I think, first of all, it signals that whoever killed him would have had to sneak up from behind. And we know that from just listening to the sound of the scene, because we can hear him kind of like gasp as it's happening and then fall out of his chair. And that's what distracts Tara, where she gets up and goes out to investigate the sound. So that already feels more like a Richie thing. Like, so far, if we're going by the Wes kill where he kind of snuck up behind him, and the Vince kill where he also snuck up behind him, that is more so his MO. Amber's just balls to the wall, will go out stabbing people, shooting people. Richie is more stealthy and covert. And then there's also the fact that while this is all going down, the power is shut off on the wing, which means that one of them had to be elsewhere to do that. And just with the timing of how Richie was on the floor first, and then Amber stages the fake attack, that means that she was probably the one that was away and not there present when the officer was killed. So that's my theory on that. There's a lot of other little hints and stuff in the scene. Like, honestly, if you haven't seen it, go watch the video. It'll explain it a lot more. By default, we know that Amber killed Dewey. She also admitted to it later on. We also know that she killed Liv, obviously. We saw that. And then Sam killed Richie. And even though Gail initially killed Amber, the final blow, which is what we're going by here, was Tara. So there we go. Scream 5. Scream 6, Laura obviously is Jason. And then this is, I think that whoever killed Jason also killed Greg, just because it was all in the apartment. Of course, there's no real concrete proof towards that, but considering how messed up his body was, I think that this was probably Wayne for both of them, at least for Greg, just because maybe the other, like his kids were there to help him, but I'm going to credit this to Wayne specifically, and also Jason, because he would have waited there for him to come home. And also, if you match the killing style of just sort of like that quick fire, rapid stabbing motion to the gut, it's very similar to the bodega kill, which, like I said, I think that all the bodega people were also Wayne. Because even though he was at the crime scene, it was very close to the bodega and more feasible for him to get away to do that, since both Ethan and Quinn were still in the apartment. The span of time between Gail calling Sam, which she hung up, or I guess when Sam spoke to Wayne on the phone, and then them going to the bodega. That was 6 minutes of time. We didn't see any of the friends leave the apartment at the same time as Sam and Tara, whereas Wayne could have just rushed around the corner and then gone back. Either way, it's very improbable for any three of the killers to have done that, but it makes the most sense that it would have been Wayne. So that'll bring us to Dr. Stone, and this is something that I kind of posed in my Who Killed Who in Scream 6 video, is that the killers were following a schedule. So all of the events that took place on the first night, which was the Saturday, those were all Wayne's kills, which would have included Greg and Jason, and then the bodega attack. Everything that happened on Sunday was Ethan. He then had possession of the Billy Loomis mask, so that would have included Dr. Stone. Wayne was still at the precinct right before Dr. Stone's murder, and we could see by the clock on the wall it was 8:10. Kirby had just arrived. Wayne would have been way too busy to have left at that point, because this murder took place at 8:37 according to the information shown on the murder board. So kind of difficult for it to have been Wayne. And if Ethan was the one who did the apartment attacks, which I believe it was, so that would have been Paul 2.0 and Annika, which we should know because obviously it's not Quinn. And in terms of everything that Wayne had said later on, is that he just made sure that he was the first one on the scene. And also, if we're going by killing styles, Ethan, the way that he stabs Annika in the gut, there's also, he has a thing where he likes to slice people in the shoulder. He did that to Mindy, and he did it to Sam later on in the shrine. He also stabs Kirby in a similar way that he stabs Annika, which in both cases, Sam kind of intervenes by knocking him on the head with like either a knife block or a brick. So I think that that's very telling that that was Ethan. And then at that point, the mask would have then been passed off to Quinn, where she killed this poor guy who just was minding his own business, Brooks. And I've been told that she's not throwing him through the bookshelf, like he's being pushed through it, which, I can accept that. The conceit of Ghostface is that, or any of the killers, is that when they're wearing the Ghostface costume, they somehow have this superhuman strength. And I guess that would allow for Quinn to hurl this guy through the bookshelf. Either way, I'm not too fussy about it. Same with the Amber killing Dewey. Okay, now finishing things off here, Quinn was Sam. Bailey was Sam. And even though Tara had the initial Ethan stab, Kirby is the one that finished him off. So let's take a look at what everyone has. So Billy and Stu are evenly split here. Mickey coming with 7 kills. Nancy with just 1, which makes sense because, I mean, the mastermind killers, they're the ones who are doing everything with their brain. They don't need to be the brute strength. And this was just an impulsive moment for her. Roman, who has the most kills just because it's him working on his own. So he's got 9 altogether. Charlie with 8, which, even if you don't believe that Jill had no kills, I think that the brutality of some of these alone is quite remarkable. But in this new era of Scream, I think that Charlie has, might possibly see a renaissance. Not a big one, but I don't think he's as bad as people have made him out to be in the past. Jill, the 2 that we see on screen, which it just makes the most logical sense to me. Amber and Richie, 50-50. I don't care that Sam tells Wayne in the shrine that Richie made his girlfriend do all of the killing. That was clearly just something that she said to get a reaction out of Wayne. If you look at the script for Scream 6, the line was almost all of the killing. They obviously changed that because, they wanted her comment to be more pointed. And this is really just based on radio silence in interviews being very inconsistent. Like, they will say whatever. And I don't know if that's because they don't know or they just are having fun playing these games with people. I'm not really a fan of that gaslighting method. I prefer Wes Craven's method of just kind of being very coy and like, oh, a magician never reveals his tricks. But as far as I'm concerned, it was 50-50. If you look at the other things, like the attacks, because there are a lot of attacks, Amber definitely did a lot more of the heavy lifting. But in terms of success rate, I think that they're evenly matched. Jason, just the 1 kill. Wayne, these 5 people. Ethan had the 3. Quinn had 1. And Sydney, technically, I mean, you could... We'll say 4 just because, you know, she had Mickey's as well. I think that Mrs. Loomis was already dead, so I don't attribute that to her. That was Cotton's kill. Gail assisted Sydney with the Mickey kill. Roman was all Dewey. I mean, he was still alive after Sydney stabbed him. And then Sam has now wiped out the 3 of the Kirsches. Tara had Amber and Kirby with Ethan. So yeah, that's gonna be everything. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this summary of Who Killed Who in the Scream franchise. If you want more in-depth analysis, go check out this playlist here. You can see all of the Scream movies. I do plan on doing 1 to 4 over because I want to do more in-depth reviews on those. But until next time, I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.